Welcome to our channel, where seemingly peaceful suburban stories explode with drama more intense than a TV series. Here, you'll witness thrilling showdowns, jaw-dropping comebacks, and brilliantly crafted revenge from the most ordinary neighbors. If you're a fan of real-life justice, true stories packed with twists worthy of a novel, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And now, let's dive into today's story. I had just returned from a week-long hiking trip. No cell signal, no emails, no people. An absolute paradise nestled in nature. I thought I'd come back to peace and quiet, a cold glass of wine, and the soft hum of the hot tub filter bubbling in my backyard. But the moment I stepped through the gate, something strange stirred in my chest. Something was off, very off. Wet footprints trailed across the stone path leading to the back of the house. A wine cork was wedged between the wooden deckboards. Two soggy, crumpled towels were carelessly draped over my patio chairs, like white flags of surrender after a drunken battle. I barely had time to raise an eyebrow before my eyes locked onto the hot tub. The cover was crooked, one side hanging awkwardly, as if someone had rushed to throw it back on. The water wasn't as hot as it should have been, just lukewarm. Worse, there were smudges along the tub's edge, not mine. That eerie, unmistakable feeling settled in. Someone had been here, in my space. The one place I still had control over after the emotional wreckage of my divorce. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling. Not from cold, but from instinct. A month earlier, I'd installed a motion-activated security camera in the backyard for peace of mind. When the footage loaded, there she was. Karen, sun hat, sunglasses, red wine in hand, sinking into my hot tub like she owned it. And she wasn't alone. 3 others joined her for what could only be described as a suburban spa retreat, and this wasn't a one-time offense. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, they turned my backyard into their own personal Napa Valley. I didn't need to be a detective to piece it together. They had trespassed, violated, and tainted the last bit of peace I had. And I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to end with a simple apology. I didn't wait another minute. Phone in hand, the footage of Karen and her friends lounging in my hot tub still playing on loop, I marched straight across the street. The door swung open after the first knock, and there she was, Karen. That fake sweet smile, the pearl necklace, and that voice I'd never been able to stomach. "Jake, welcome back. I hope your trip was amazing," she chirped. I hadn't even opened my mouth when she continued, as if we were lifelong friends. "Oh, and by the way, I hope you don't mind. We used your hot tub a bit while you were gone. It just seemed like such a waste to leave it unused, right?" I stood frozen. My temples were throbbing. "Mind?" I repeated, carefully controlling my voice, even as my left eye twitched. "That's private property. You had no right to be there." Karen gave a light chuckle, the kind of laugh people use when they think you're being overly dramatic. "Oh, come on, don't be so uptight. You weren't even home." I could hardly believe what I was hearing, but Karen wasn't finished. She turned, walked inside, and came back out holding an HOA newsletter. "I wrote a little thank you blurb in this month's issue," she said, as if she were reciting poetry. I glanced at the paper. Soak up the summer. Huge thanks to our wonderful neighbor Jake for generously sharing his spa space with the HOA community. I was speechless. She hadn't just trespassed. She had fabricated an entire narrative and distributed it across the neighborhood like some sort of smug proclamation. That night, I sat alone in my backyard, staring at the hot tub like it had cheated on me. But the truth was, it hadn't betrayed me. It had been taken. And I knew one thing for certain. If I didn't act, Karen wouldn't stop. Not just with me, but with anyone she deemed beneath her. This wasn't just about a hot tub anymore. It was the beginning of a quiet war between personal freedom and the fake authority of someone who had crowned herself queen of the HOA. 4-0. I'm not the kind of person who looks for a fight, but when my boundaries are blatantly crossed, I respond in my own way, with intellect and a touch of strategic creativity. After that night, reading the Soak Up the Summer newsletter and staring at my hot tub like it had somehow betrayed me, I realized one thing clearly. Karen didn't act by accident. She did it deliberately, with the confidence of someone far too used to bullying the entire neighborhood under the banner of the HOA. But this time, she picked the wrong target. I'm Jackson Reed, a systems engineer trained to handle crises, optimize solutions, and most importantly, turn chaos into the perfect counterattack. The next morning, I launched Operation Blue Burn, my personal code name for the sweet revenge that was about to unfold. Step 1. Find something harmless, yet impossible to hide. I chose Tracer Dye, a pool-safe, bright blue dye that's safe for skin, but nearly impossible to wash off. Then, I stopped by the spice shop and picked up a bottle of ghost pepper oil. Just a few drops in warm water could make your skin itch like you rolled around in fire. The plan was simple. Make it look like I had left town again, giving them just enough false confidence to walk right into my trap. I accidentally mentioned to the mailman that I'd be off camping all weekend, intentionally left the porch light off, preheated the hot tub, and added wide-angle cameras and motion-triggered lights. The whole setup was a stage, and I was just waiting for the lead actress to make her entrance. I call it art, not just retaliation, but a vivid, hands-on lesson in personal boundaries and the price of entitlement. And knowing Karen, I was certain she wouldn't resist the lure of a free spa she believed she had claimed. I didn't need to lift a finger. All I had to do was flip the switch. Karen would light the fire and then burn herself with it. Sunday morning arrived, and just as I'd predicted, Karen showed up. Sporting a beige visor and her signature smug smile, she didn't come alone. 3 other women from the HOA followed closely behind, including Susan Blake, famous for sending angry letters to neighbors about wind chimes being too loud, and Dennis Kramer, her sketchy cousin who always lingered creepily at neighborhood BBQs. But the most surprising guest was at the rear, Mr. Raymond Ellis, the actual HOA president. The same man Karen had quietly ousted by spreading rumors that he was too old to keep up. He wore a polo shirt, carried a folding chair, and a Tupperware of deviled eggs. His presence made one thing crystal clear. This little spa visit had been dressed up as an official HOA-sanctioned gathering. I watched from upstairs, cameras rolling. The side gate creaked open like a slow-motion movie scene. They strolled into my backyard, as if returning to a familiar resort. Not a single knock. They sank into the warm water with satisfied sighs, the clinking of wine glasses echoing like victory bells. Karen raised her glass and declared, "Cheers to another glorious HOA Sunday, and a special thanks to our favorite nature boy, Jackson Reed, for always keeping the door open." 7 minutes later, the water started to change. Not all at once, just a slow, spreading hue of deep ocean blue, like a warning painted in watercolor. One woman frowned, touched her leg, then stared at her hand as if she just dipped it in hair dye. Karen waved it off. "Must be the lighting. This tub always looks a little weird." But weird doesn't burn. Ghost pepper oil does. Dennis leapt up, slipped, and let out a string of German profanity. Susan screamed, her eyes burning. Karen scratched at her neck as red blotches spread like wildfire. Mr. Ellis clutched his deviled eggs like a useless shield. Karen shrieked, slipped from the tub, and crashed onto the deck, leaving a trail of bright blue shame behind her. That was my cue. I stepped out, calm, composed, phone in hand, live streaming the chaos from my security cams. "I think," I said evenly, "it's time we talked about property rights and personal boundaries." No one replied, just the sound of scratching, groaning, and Karen's burning red face, not just from the chili oil, but from the realization that she had just walked straight into a trap built from her own arrogance. I thought after that humiliating fall, Karen would retreat, at least long enough to recover some dignity. But no, she wasn't the type to back down. 2 days after the boiling hot tub incident, I found a neatly tucked envelope in my mailbox. This wasn't your everyday letter. It was printed on ivory-colored paper, embossed with the HOA emblem, like something from a county law office. It was sealed tightly, with a level of pomp so ridiculous it was almost impressive. I opened it, read each line slowly, and nearly burst out laughing. The letter accused me of disrupting the community's visual harmony with unapproved modifications, motion lights, security cameras, and a so-called unauthorized water transfer system. The cherry on top? A $500 fine unless I immediately rectified the violations, with threats of escalation per HOA regulations. One problem: I'm not in the HOA. I never signed their charter, never agreed to their rules. My house sits outside their jurisdiction, something Karen knew perfectly well. But she decided to test the limits with administrative theater, hoping I'd panic or pay up just to avoid the hassle. I didn't. I took the letter, got in my car, and drove straight to Mr. Raymond Ellis's house. When I handed him the envelope, he read it once, sighed deeply, and rubbed his forehead like he'd just aged a decade in 10 seconds. "She's still sending these," he muttered. "I thought I told her to stop." "She's turning the HOA into her personal playground," I replied, pulling out my tablet and launching a digital collection of videos, photos, and emails, all documenting Karen's abuse of power, forging authority, printing unauthorized newsletters, misusing community funds for parties, and fabricating documents. "Would you be willing to present this to the full board?" he asked. "With pleasure," I said. The game had moved far beyond my backyard now. It was heading straight into the HOA boardroom, a place Karen once controlled with titles, technicalities, and false confidence. But this time, I wasn't showing up with accusations. I was showing up with evidence, and the quiet support of a neighborhood fed up with a self-appointed queen who mistook fear for respect. The emergency HOA board meeting was held on Thursday afternoon, in the community room usually reserved for flowerbed discussions and trash pickup schedules. But this time, the atmosphere was heavy, like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. I was invited not as a member, but as the official victim of HOA overreach. And I didn't come empty-handed. I walked in carrying a small projector and a presentation titled simply Operation Karen Fallout. No one laughed, but as I played the footage, Karen unlocking my backyard gate, Karen clinking glasses in my hot tub like some suburban empress, the room began to shift. Eyes widened, hands covered mouths. One board member muttered, "She used HOA funds for imported cheese." I laid out the evidence, one piece at a time. Newsletters with forged signatures, activity fund invoices mysteriously redirected to wine purchases, internal emails faked to look like board-approved decisions. And finally, the grand finale. Karen, red-faced like a boiled lobster, scrambling out of my blue-stained hot tub, screaming in utter panic. The room erupted, not in anger, but in laughter. That's when Karen walked in, 10 minutes late, clutching a stack of documents, her eyes icy. But her indignation never got a chance to speak. The board had already reached its verdict. One by one, they voted, unanimously, to remove her from her HOA leadership role pending a formal investigation. Not a single person stood up for her. She didn't say a word. She just clenched her folder, turned on her heel, and walked out, back ramrod straight, steps heavy. I followed at a distance, watching her storm across the street to her house. She paused at her door, looked back over her shoulder, and without a word, flipped me off. The next morning, every resident received an official notice. Karen had been suspended, and a full audit of HOA finances was underway. Suddenly, old stories resurfaced. How she once measured a neighbor's lawn with a ruler, scolded kids for sidewalk chalk, and printed HOA-approved mailbox signs to sell at triple the price. Karen's self-appointed throne had crumbled, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood exhaled. I had assumed that after being ousted, Karen would go quiet, maybe retreat with a shred of dignity, or at the very least, learn to keep her mouth shut. But no, true to her stubborn, spiteful nature, she wasn't done. A few days after losing her title, I got a strange call from the city office. The clerk on the other end chuckled as he asked why they'd just received a hand-drawn HOA map, with my house circled in red and labeled as a non-compliant parcel for forced annexation. I nearly choked on my coffee. Unable to accept defeat, Karen had submitted a formal request to expand the HOA's boundaries, just to drag my property under her jurisdiction. The sketch included things like a water access reclamation strategy, and honestly, it looked more like a battle plan for Normandy than a civic proposal. The city rejected it immediately and even flagged her file for abuse of administrative procedures. That's when I knew it was time for Phase 3. I hired a licensed plumber to quietly rework the irrigation lines behind my property. Karen had once illegally tapped into my private well to water her precious rose garden. Now, I had the system rerouted, fitted with a special backflow valve, and reconnected the old line. But this time, it didn't carry fresh water. It carried gray water, a harmless but foul-smelling mix from an old wastewater tank I hadn't used in years. At precisely 3:13 p.m. on Tuesday, Karen activated her sprinkler system, and her rose garden collapsed. Jets of water shot out, reeking of compost and despair, as if a sewage treatment plant had burst open. Her flowers wilted on impact, drooping like they'd given up on life. Karen burst outside in pajamas and flip-flops, screaming as the stench blasted her in the face. She scrambled to yank the hose from the ground, but it was too late. The soil was soaked, the plants ruined, and the system was officially flagged as contaminated by a city inspector the following day. I didn't need to say a word. I just sat on my deck, iced drink in hand, watching as the pride of Karen's backyard slowly dissolved in the very filth she had sown, born of entitlement, watered with deceit, and finally undone by karma. After the infamous sewage rose garden incident, Karen vanished from the community scene. No more HOA meetings where she reigned like a suburban queen, no more self-written newsletters dripping with condescension. Instead, she became a silent shadow in the very neighborhood she once ruled with an iron fist. Residents began sharing stories they had once only whispered. How Karen made kids scrub chalk drawings off the sidewalk, scolded elderly veterans for flying the American flag at the wrong height, and sold HOA-compliant mailbox plates that she printed at home for triple the price. Though she tried to maintain her dignity, Karen now stepped outside in long sleeves, even in the summer sun, hiding the faint bluish hue still lingering from her tracer dye disaster. Rumors swirled that she was trying to sell her house, but no one wanted to buy the former fortress of the fallen HOA tyrant, a place once soaked in power, now steeped in compost and bitterness. Meanwhile, I, Jackson Reed, became an unexpected neighborhood hero. People who had once been bullied by Karen came forward with their own tales, like survivors recounting legends of a vanquished witch. One man said she measured his lawn and issued a warning because it was over 2 inches tall. Another shared a citation she sent for backyard lighting that clashed with the neighborhood's aesthetic harmony. Some neighbors even tried to nominate me to the newly restructured HOA board. I declined with a laugh. I'm more of a behind-the-camera kind of guy, not behind the conference table. But I did add a little something to my newly restored hot tub area, a small, tasteful sign that read, "Jets only, Karen not welcome." Next to it floated a blue rubber duck wearing a tiny crown. His name, Duke of Dye, a symbol of the peace reclaimed from tyranny. In the end, justice didn't come from a courtroom. It came from patience, a well-executed plan, and a community finally ready to say, enough. Karen had no power, no allies, and most importantly, no one was listening anymore. I sat in my freshly cleaned hot tub, the warm water gently rippling under the golden glow of dusk. A cold drink in hand, I gazed out over the backyard, once the battlefield of a strange suburban war no one could have ever imagined. Now, peace had returned. No more anonymous letters, no more knocks demanding I take down my lights or replace my mailbox. Just the sound of water, the whisper of wind, and the quiet satisfaction of a victory won without throwing a single punch. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who wanted to protect the one thing left to him after a broken marriage, peace and quiet. But when someone crosses the line, using the word community as a weapon to control, to bully, and to invade your privacy, that peace is no longer a luxury. It becomes something worth defending. Karen thought power came from speaking loudly, making rules, and printing glossy newsletters. What she forgot is this. In the suburbs, people can put up with a lot, until they decide not to. And when one person stands up, others start to follow. Not with protests or lawsuits, but with backyard barbecues, knowing glances, and whispered jokes over fences. That's suburban justice, not the kind handed down in courtrooms, but the kind that only needs the right person, the right moment, and a well-placed trap. This story was never just about a hot tub or chili oil. It was about boundaries, not wooden fences, but the invisible lines between coexisting and overstepping. It was about saying no when someone mistakes kindness for weakness. And it was about turning a petty tyrant into a laughingstock, not through lies, but by letting their own behavior speak louder than anything else ever could. I looked down at the little blue rubber duck bobbing between the bubbles, Duke of Dye, the new guardian of my backyard peace, and smiled. Peace didn't come from the law. It didn't come from lawsuits. It came from neighbors finally realizing Karen is not the HOA, and the HOA can never be Karen. In this story, one that might seem humorous and packed with suburban drama, lies a set of profound lessons that anyone can apply to everyday life. First and foremost, it's a powerful reminder of the importance of personal boundaries. Even in a shared community, every individual has the right to privacy and control over their own space. Karen's decision to use her neighbor's hot tub without permission and then boldly publicize it in the HOA newsletter illustrates a deep disregard for those boundaries and property rights. In real life, if we don't stand firm in protecting our personal space, kindness can be mistaken for weakness, and generosity can become an excuse for others to take advantage. Secondly, the story teaches us the power of intelligent resistance. Jackson, the main character, didn't choose violence or loud confrontation. Instead, he responded with creativity, technical know-how, and patience. He's a model for how justice doesn't always need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, the most strategic and well-timed actions speak louder than any argument. His approach was not only effective, but also poetic. Another vital lesson is the transformative strength of community solidarity. At first, Karen was able to manipulate and intimidate the neighborhood into silence. But once the truth came to light, that silence broke, and others began to speak up. Too often, we forget that it only takes one voice saying enough to spark a wave of change. Silence is fertile ground for the abuse of power, but courage is contagious. Finally, the story is a clear reminder that authority does not equal righteousness. Titles, positions, or perceived power mean nothing without respect, transparency, and humility. Whether in a small HOA or a large institution, true leadership is about service, not domination. Real life may not always have clear-cut villains, but this story makes it clear. Boundaries, respect, and shared accountability are essential values that keep our neighborhoods not just peaceful, but decent, just, and worth living in. If you've ever had a Karen try to run your neighborhood like she's royalty, or if you've witnessed HOA power being abused to bully innocent residents, then this story probably left you feeling both satisfied and outraged. Let's not allow people like Karen to keep pulling strings from behind their white picket fences. Like this video if you believe Jackson did the right thing. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more tense, clever, and hilarious suburban sagas like this one. And if you've ever had your own run-in with a Karen, share this video so we can all remember one thing. Power should never be handed to those who don't respect boundaries. We're neighbors, not Karen's loyal subjects. Disclaimer: viewer discretion. Advised, the story presented in this video is intended for entertainment and illustrative purposes only. It is a fictional narrative inspired by common neighborhood dynamics, blended with relatable everyday scenarios. Any resemblance to actual persons, events, or locations is purely coincidental and not intended to target or defame any individual or organization. This channel does not endorse or encourage retaliatory actions, invasions of privacy, or the use of harmful substances, whether for protest or humor. Elements such as colored dye, chili oil, or altered water systems are described purely as storytelling devices and should not be replicated in real life. We encourage viewers to enjoy this content with an open mind, a sense of humor, and critical thinking. Comments, feedback, and discussions are welcome as long as they remain respectful, constructive, and do not promote harmful behavior in any community setting.